Hello and welcome to Inside the Americas, our weekly roundup of the top stories from across the continent. I'm Olivia Salazar-Winspear and here's what's coming up in this week's show. Donald Trump faces an impeachment inquiry as the US president stands accused of soliciting foreign interference to smear his rival. Our reporters check in with the environmental activists facing hostility in the Brazilian Amazon. And Guatemalans are fleeing the country in record numbers, with some families prepared to entrust their children to adult traffickers who'll get them to the US border. Well, first, could it be the smoking gun anti-Trump politicians have been waiting for? Speaker of the House of Representatives Nancy Pelosi has announced an inquiry to impeach the US president. It was prompted by allegations that Donald Trump tried to strong-arm a foreign head of state into investigating his political rival Joe Biden. Naomi Lloyd has this report.
It's a high-stakes move by Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi to launch a formal impeachment inquiry against the president.
The actions taken to date by the president have seriously violated the Constitution, especially when the president says, Article 2 says I can do whatever I want.
The decision follows a whistleblowing report from an intelligence official. It alleges that Donald Trump tried to pressure the Ukrainian president into investigating his political rival Joe Biden. Trump is also accused of withholding US military aid to Ukraine as leverage. The White House has now released a transcript of the phone call on the 25th of July, which shows Trump did ask Volodymyr Zelensky to investigate Biden, whose son worked for a Ukrainian gas firm. Trump has slammed the investigation as politically motivated.
It's just a continuation of the witch hunt. It's the worst witch hunt in political history. It was a very good call. There was no pressure put on them whatsoever.
So is it an impeachable offence? Well, the Democrats believe so. The US Constitution lays out the grounds for impeachment as treason and bribery, as well as other high crimes and misdemeanours, and this can include unethical behaviour. So what happens next? First of all, there's an investigation. Then House of Representatives lawmakers debate and lay out the grounds for impeachment, followed by a vote requiring a simple majority. And with the Democrats in the majority, the vote would probably be carried. If approved, it moves on to the Senate, where proceedings would likely stall as the president's Republican Party holds the majority. 20 Republican senators would have to turn on Donald Trump for the president to be ousted. And if history is any indicator, impeachment proceedings are unlikely to bring about his removal. Impeachment has occurred only twice in US history, against Andrew Johnson in 1868 and against Bill Clinton in 1998. In both cases, the presidents were acquitted by the Senate.
If looks could kill, this was the murderous glance Greta Thunberg gave President Donald Trump at the UN Climate Action Summit. The Swedish teenager gave an impassioned speech there where she laid into politicians and world leaders for their lack of action to tackle climate change. In the past, Thunberg has had strong criticism for climate change deniers such as Donald Trump, who pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord in 2017. Next, on Tuesday, Jair Bolsonaro opened the UN General Assembly with a speech that pulled no punches. The Brazilian president rejected criticism over his handling of the forest fires that have ravaged the Amazon, accusing international critics of having a, quote, colonial spirit. The far-right leader also said that scientists are wrong to claim that the rainforest functions as the lungs of the world. This comes after a Human Rights Watch report accused Bolsonaro of giving a green light to illegal loggers in the Amazon. While our correspondents in Brazil have been following environmental activists tracking those fires in the north of the country, here's more from France 24's Fanny Lothar and Catherine Osborne.
Daniclé Aguiar is piloting a reconnaissance flight that unfortunately he's become used to in recent weeks. Since the wave of fires hit the Amazon in August, he's identified deforested areas for the NGO Greenpeace. The Pará region in northern Brazil is one of the most affected by fires. The team spotted new fires on indigenous Arara lands that should be protected.
We record and send the data to the environmental police.
While the UN Climate Summit began, Jair Bolsonaro and his environment minister Ricardo Salles were starting a diplomatic campaign, to much criticism, to create a new fund for the Amazon.
Denying the problem will not make it disappear.
The NGO responds with images.
How can you hide this? The satellite proves us right. It's not by legalizing criminal activities that the government will solve the problem of the destruction of the Amazon. The government says that we have to cut budgets, that there are other priorities than the protection of the Amazon. So where will the money go for its new fund?
The pilots and the Greenpeace field agent will remain anonymous for fear of retaliation.
The red dots are areas of deforestation that we've spotted.
A few hours earlier, flying low over these illegal mines, shots were fired at our plane.
It's not an easy activity. You have to fly low to identify the machines used. Everything we do in the Amazon, we must be careful because we're never safe from danger.
Accused by Jair Bolsonaro of setting the fires, NGOs are targeted more than ever in the region. Below us, the Alto do Chão Nature Reserve was aflame just a few days ago. These two activist biologists helped the volunteer firefighters who were short on resources. They've since received threats.
The threats are invisible. They have no face, no names, but we feel them.
The firefighters arrived and we saw that these burned plots of land had already been prepared for sale. Many of the firefighters who are helping out are scared, and they're right to be. I am too, because I was the first to denounce what was happening. With a government as complicated as ours, a minister of the environment with rhetoric against the environment. The city helped us reach the fire, the regional government did too, but the federal government offered us no help.
In this communication war between the government and international NGOs, it's often the local activists who pay the price, in a region where burning land is often a sign of corruption. Pará is the state where the most activists are killed in Brazil.
It's time for our number of the week now, which is 50,693. That's the number of migrants apprehended while crossing the southern border of the United States illegally, and it's just for the month of August. Last year, the case of Jacqueline Carl shocked the world after the 7-year-old died in police custody in El Paso. The Guatemalan child had fallen seriously ill with an infection after crossing the border into the United States. And like Jacqueline, this year Carlos, Felipe and Juan have all died in the detention of US authorities. These children had been separated from their parents, held in cages, and like them, hundreds of minors are imprisoned in the US every day for crossing the border illegally. Despite this, many are still prepared to leave their home countries, places like Guatemala, where increasing numbers of children take huge risks to build a better future elsewhere. Yuka Roy and our colleagues at France 2 report.
In the town of Esquipulas on the southeast edge of Guatemala, this school has lost about 2/5 of its pupils. Many of them headed out on a long journey to the United States.
As a Guatemalan and as a teacher, I feel very sad. Because among the children who've left are the talents of tomorrow that our country needs. I also feel sad when I think about the grueling journeys those kids must endure and the risks they take in order to get to the United States.
Risking their lives in search of a better life. Images of families heading north from countries like Guatemala, Honduras or Mexico have been beamed around the world. But there's also another, lesser-known wave of migrants, that of underage children travelling without their families, but with total strangers. That was the case for 13-year-old Hector. His mother is so poor she doesn't even have a photo of him. A few months ago, she entrusted her teenage son to an adult man, a distant acquaintance. She stayed behind with her 6 other children and is distraught over the choice she made.
His dream was to study and to become someone important. He knew that if he stayed here, he would always be poor. And when we're poor, we're treated like dogs. He said, "Mum, I have to leave. I want to become successful and that's not possible here." It was difficult to see him leave, probably for good, but it was his decision.
Smugglers encourage single adults to travel with minors because they know US immigration laws are slightly more lenient for families with children. They charge less if their client brings along a minor and pretends to be the parent, according to a local official who agreed to talk in private.
What I know is that smugglers, known as coyotes here, charge between 8,000 and 10,000 euros each for an adult traveller. But if the adult is accompanied by a child, then the fee drops to about 3,000 euros. That's because there's less work for the smugglers to do. They would only need to deliver both of them to the US border crossing for them to be arrested.
Hector and his adult companion are said to have crossed the US border after 9 days and been arrested right away. US authorities somehow figured out that the man was not Hector's father and deported him. The teenager was sent to an immigration center like this one in Texas. The Trump administration has tightened border checks, including running a pilot DNA testing program to crack down on fake families. But the measures have not deterred asylum seekers from making their journeys northward.
Finally, it's a sacred spot for UFO enthusiasts. Area 51 is officially a US military facility in Nevada, but it's passed into pop culture folklore, and many believe it's a point of contact for extraterrestrials. Millions of those sci-fi fans had planned to storm the base to free those aliens last weekend, according to their Facebook event. But in the end, it was cancelled and only a handful of people braved tight security at the entrance. They were, however, dressed for the occasion in tinfoil hats and alien antennae. We'll leave you with some of the pictures. That's all for this week's edition of Inside the Americas. We'll be back next week with more stories from across the continent. Till then, stay with us here on France 24.
French wine is arguably one of the best things about France.
And some say it's the best in the world, although that's debatable. But one thing's for sure is that wine is an art form in France. It's an integral part of our culture and a thriving industry.
But just why does French wine have such a great reputation? What's the trick to getting a really good bottle? And what are the latest trends?
Join us for this episode of French Connections Plus, where we savor the wonderful world of French wine.
French Connections Plus, presented by Jeannie Godula and Florence Villeneuve.